Ambassador Jiho Kim stepped into the massive alien ship, and his heart nearly stopped. The walls around him glowed with a cold blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Everything was huge. The doorways, the ceiling, even the air itself felt heavy and strange. He had trained for this moment his entire life, but nothing could have prepared him for actually standing inside a NIGMA Empire warship. Behind him walked Commander Hyuna Park, her military boots clicking against the crystal floor. She kept her hand close to her weapon, though they all knew it would be useless here. These aliens could vaporize their entire ship with a single thought. Science Officer Taewon Lee followed quietly, his recording device hidden in his jacket pocket. Whatever happened here today, humanity needed to remember every detail. The three humans were escorted through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Alien soldiers flanked them on both sides, creatures that looked like walking nightmares, with too many arms and eyes that changed color like mood rings. Jiho forced himself to keep walking straight, even though every instinct screamed at him to run. They entered a chamber so vast it could have held a football stadium. At the center sat the NIGMA High Council, beings that made the soldiers look friendly by comparison. Their leader rose from what might have been a throne, towering at least 12 feet tall. His forearms moved in complex patterns, while his multiple eyes focused on the tiny human delegation. "So," the creature spoke through a device that made his voice sound like nails on a chalkboard, "these are the famous humans we have heard so little about." Laughter filled the chamber, but it wasn't human laughter. It sounded like breaking glass mixed with the screech of metal being torn apart. The aliens found something hilarious about three small humans standing before their mighty Empire Overlord Vexitar, as he called himself, gestured dismissively with one of his arms. "Your species discovered fire while we were already traveling between stars. Your most advanced weapons are little metal pellets shot from tubes. We have energy shields that can stop the radiation from dying suns." Jiho took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine whether humanity lived or died. "Overlord Vexitar, we haven't come here to beg or to bargain. We've come to deliver a warning." The laughter stopped instantly. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of alien technology. Every eye in the room focused on the small human who had just threatened the most powerful empire in the galaxy. "A warning?" General Zethra, the military commander, leaned forward from her position beside the throne. Her 6 eyes narrowed to slits. "You dare to warn us?" "Earth is under human protection," Jiho continued, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through his veins. "Any aggressive action against our world will be met with consequences that you cannot imagine." The silence stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Then Vexitar began to laugh again, this time joined by every alien in the chamber. The sound was deafening, echoing off the crystal walls until it became a roar of contempt. "Consequences?" Vexitar wiped what might have been tears from his eyes. "Little human, our scouts have already mapped your pathetic solar system. Your strongest ships would make poor toys for our children. Your weapons couldn't scratch the paint on our smallest patrol craft." Commander Hyuna stepped forward, her jaw set in determination. "You've been warned. What happens next is entirely your choice." General Zethra rose from her seat, her massive form casting a shadow over the humans. "Our plasma cannons can crack moons in half. Our energy beams can slice through asteroids like butter. What exactly do you think your primitive species can do to threaten us?" Taewon spoke for the first time since entering the chamber. "That's not really the question you should be asking." "Oh?" Vexitar seemed amused by the human scientist. "Then what question should we be asking?" "The question," Taewon replied quietly, "is what happens when a species that has spent its entire existence fighting for survival decides that survival means taking you down with us." The amusement drained from the alien faces. Something in the human's tone suggested this wasn't an empty threat. Vexitar's eyes shifted to a deep, angry red. 72 hours, humans. You have 72 hours to surrender your planet's resources to the NIGMA Empire. After that, we will take them by force. Your warning is noted and completely dismissed." As the human delegation was escorted back to their small ship, alien guards whispered among themselves in their clicking language. They had conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved dozens of species, but they had never encountered anything quite like humans before. Back on their ship, Huna looked at Jiho with concern. "Do you think they bought it? Do you think they'll underestimate us?" Jiho stared out at the massive NIGMA fleet surrounding them, hundreds of ships, each one capable of destroying cities. They just made the biggest mistake in their empire's history. They think we're weak because our technology looks primitive. Taewon activated his communication device. "Earth Command, this is the diplomatic mission. The NIGMA Empire has rejected our warning. They've given us 72 hours before they attack." The response came immediately from General Minho back on Earth. "Understood. All defensive protocols are now active. Let them come." As their small ship pulled away from the alien fleet, none of the humans looked back. They had delivered humanity's message, and now it was time to show the galaxy what happened when you threatened Earth. The NIGMA Empire was about to learn why humans had survived everything their dangerous world had thrown at them. The warning had been given. Soon the galaxy would see why it should have been heeded. Fleet Admiral Kothang floated in his private chamber aboard the massive warship Inevitable Victory, studying the holographic displays that showed everything his scouts had learned about Earth. The blue planet rotated slowly before him, looking peaceful and defenseless. Around it, tiny human settlements dotted the orbital space like scattered toys. He zoomed in on the human ships patrolling near Earth's moon, pathetic metal constructs that burned chemical fuel to move through space. His own vessel could vaporize. A dozen of them without even warming up its main weapons. The Admiral's multiple eyes shifted color with amusement as he watched one human ship struggle to dock with what appeared to be their largest space station. "Sir," his tactical officer entered the chamber, his forearms carrying data tablets. "The intelligence report on human military capabilities is complete." Kothang accepted the reports with one arm, while continuing to study Earth with his other eyes. "Tell me the highlights. How long until we can begin strip mining their planet?" "Based on our observations, resistance should collapse within the first hour of engagement. Their most advanced weapons appear to be kinetic projectiles, essentially metal slugs fired from crude launchers. Their energy output readings suggest they've barely mastered nuclear fusion." The Admiral laughed, a sound like grinding metal gears. "Nuclear fusion? We mastered antimatter containment before your species learned to walk upright. What about their defensive positions?" "Minimal orbital defenses. A few dozen armed platforms around their homeworld, maybe 50 combat vessels total. Their largest ship appears to be about the size of our patrol boats." Kothang dismissed the officer with a wave. 200 ships for this operation seemed excessive now. He could probably conquer Earth with a single squadron and have time left over for lunch. Still, the High Council wanted this to serve as an example to other primitive species who might consider defying the Empire. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Himalayan mountains on Earth, General Minho Choi stood in humanity's most secret facility. The command center buzzed with activity as hundreds of officers monitored screens showing every movement of the approaching NIGMA fleet. The walls themselves seemed alive with flowing data streams and tactical projections. "Status report on Ghost Protocol," Minho commanded, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's survival. Captain Yuna Seo looked up from her tactical station, where dozens of screens showed hidden installations throughout the solar system. "All Phantom bases report ready. The asteroid belt installations are completely invisible to their sensors. Our stealth satellites are tracking their entire fleet." Lieutenant Ji-won Han turned from her communications post. "Sir, the enemy is maintaining standard formation. They're not even bothering with advanced scanning patterns. They think they know everything about our defenses." Dr. Sunho Kang, the chief scientist who had spent 40 years preparing for this moment, smiled grimly as he reviewed the enemy fleet composition. "Perfect. They see exactly what we want them to see. A barely spacefaring civilization with primitive chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. The secret was that humanity had been preparing for this day since their first contact with alien technology 60 years ago. Every crashed probe, every intercepted transmission, every piece of alien debris had been studied, reverse-engineered, and improved upon. But they had been very careful to keep their real capabilities hidden from prying alien eyes. "Remember," Minho addressed his staff, We've spent 4 decades making ourselves look weak. Every public space launch, every visible military exercise, every piece of technology we've allowed them to observe has been carefully chosen to reinforce their assumptions about our limitations. Above ground, the world continued as normal. People went to work. Children played in parks, and news broadcasts talked about the strange alien visitors with cautious optimism. Most of humanity had no idea that their survival depended on the enemy's arrogance. Back in space, Admiral Korthang reviewed the final approach vector. Earth hung before his fleet like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. His sensors detected the small human fleet moving to intercept them, 50 ships against 200. It would barely qualify as target practice. "Sir," his second-in-command reported, "the humans are actually forming a battle line. They intend to fight." The bridge crew erupted in laughter. Several officers had to steady themselves against their stations as they imagined the coming one-sided battle. One young communications officer wiped tears from his eyes. "Look at them." The weapons officer pointed at the tactical display. "They're arranged in a straight line like ancient naval battles. Don't they understand three-dimensional space combat?" Admiral Korthang studied the human formation with growing amusement. "They're flying directly at us. No evasive maneuvers, no complex tactics. They plan to meet our advanced fleet head-on with their primitive ships." What the NIGMA forces didn't realize was that those 50 human ships were piloted by volunteers who knew they were flying to their deaths. Their sacrifice would serve a greater purpose, to convince the aliens that this was the extent of human military power. "Begin the attack," Korthang ordered. "Let's show these humans why the NIGMA Empire rules the galaxy. Target their largest ships first. Make this quick and decisive." The massive alien fleet accelerated toward Earth, weapons charging, shields activating. In their arrogance, they had committed their entire force to what they believed would be a simple massacre. They had no idea they were flying into the most sophisticated trap in human history. On Earth, General Minho watched the approaching fleet and spoke quietly into his communicator. "All stations, this is command. The enemy has taken the bait. They think they're about to destroy a weak, primitive species. Let's show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." The greatest battle in human history was about to begin, and the aliens had no idea what was waiting for them. The first plasma. Beams cut through space like burning swords, and the small human fleet didn't stand a chance. Admiral Korthang watched from his command bridge as his weapons tore through the pathetic human ships one by one. Explosions bloomed in the darkness like deadly flowers, each one marking the end of another primitive vessel. Easier than expected, his weapons officer reported with satisfaction. "Their shields collapsed on first impact. These humans truly are as weak as our intelligence suggested." The NIGMA fleet moved forward in perfect formation, their energy weapons systematically destroying every human ship that dared to oppose them. Within minutes, the entire human fleet was nothing but glowing debris floating in space. Not a single alien vessel had even been scratched. "Begin planetary bombardment," Korthang ordered, settling back in his command chair. "Target their major cities first. We'll break their spirit before we take their resources." But as his weapons officers began targeting Earth's population centers, something impossible happened. Space around the NIGMA fleet suddenly filled with projectiles, moving at incredible speed. Not energy beams or plasma bolts, but solid chunks of metal traveling at significant fractions of light speed. The first impacts sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. Korthang's flagship shuddered as its shields flared under the assault of kinetic weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate their defenses. But these weren't ordinary projectiles. They were moving so fast that they punched through energy barriers like bullets through paper. "Where are these attacks coming from?" Korthang roared, his multiple eyes scanning the tactical displays frantically. The Kai answer came as asteroids throughout the solar system suddenly came alive. What the NIGMA scouts had dismissed as ordinary space rocks dropped their camouflage, revealing massive weapon installations hidden within their rocky shells. Railguns the size of skyscrapers emerged from asteroid surfaces, launching projectiles at velocities that made conventional weapons look like toys. Commander Sungmin Park coordinated the asteroid defense grid from his hidden base inside Ceres. The entire asteroid had been hollowed out and converted into a weapons platform over the past 20 years. Around him, hundreds of technicians worked frantically to keep the railguns firing. "Target their command ships," Zhongmin ordered into his communications array. "Every shot counts. Make them hurt." The NIGMA fleet found themselves under attack from every direction. Projectiles streamed in from hidden bases on asteroids, moons, and what they had assumed were abandoned space stations. Humanity had turned their entire solar system into a fortress, and the aliens had walked right into the middle of it. But the real surprise came when swarms of small human fighters emerged from concealment. These weren't the clunky ships the aliens had observed during their reconnaissance. These were sleek, fast vessels that moved through space like angry wasps, darting between the massive NIGMA ships with impossible agility. Wing Commander Dayun Kim led her squadron in a devastating attack run on a NIGMA dreadnought. Her fighter was smaller than the alien escape pods, but it packed weapons specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in NIGMA technology that humanity had discovered through decades of secret research. "Remember your training," she called to her pilots over the radio. "We're outnumbered, but we're not outfought. Use their size against them. Hit the shield generators and engine pods." Her fighters dove beneath the alien ship's weapon arcs, moving too fast for the large guns to track them effectively. The NIGMA vessel's captain ordered evasive maneuvers, but the massive ship couldn't match the agility of fighters, designed by a species that had learned aerial combat in Earth's atmosphere. "Impossible," the NIGMA tactical officer reported to Admiral Korthang. "These small craft are somehow penetrating our point defense systems. Their pilots are flying patterns that make no tactical sense." But the patterns made perfect sense to humans. These pilots had trained in atmospheric flight, where three-dimensional thinking was essential for survival. They flew like Earth's fighter pilots had always flown, with creativity, aggression, and a willingness to take risks that no sensible alien would consider. The space around Earth became a chaotic battleground. NIGMA ships designed for overwhelming enemies through superior firepower found themselves swarmed by human fighters that struck like lightning and vanished before return fire could find them. The aliens' advanced targeting computers couldn't predict human tactics because humans didn't follow logical combat algorithms. Captain Jae-hyun-oh commanded the human destroyer. Defiance, as it closed with a NIGMA cruiser. His ship looked primitive compared to the alien vessel, but appearances could be deceiving. Hidden beneath its crude exterior were weapons that combined human engineering with alien technology in ways the NIGMA Empire had never imagined. "Fire the hybrid cannons," Jae-hyun ordered. The weapons that emerged from his ship didn't look like anything in the NIGMA arsenal. They fired projectiles wrapped in energy fields, combining the penetrating power of kinetic weapons with the destructive force of plasma beams. The alien cruiser's shields, designed to stop one type of attack or the other, couldn't handle both simultaneously. Admiral Korthang watched his fleet disintegrating around him with growing horror. Ships that had conquered star systems were being destroyed by what should have been a primitive species. His tactical displays showed losses mounting by the minute as human weapons found weakness after weakness in NIGMA defenses. "This is impossible," he muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. "Our intelligence reports said they were barely capable of spaceflight." His science officer looked up from his station with fear in his eyes. "Sir, I'm detecting energy signatures that match our own technology. Somehow, they've reverse-engineered our weapons systems and improved them." The terrible truth began to dawn on the NIGMA commander. The humans hadn't been as primitive as they appeared. They had been watching, learning, and preparing. Every piece of alien technology that had ever fallen into human hands had been studied and used to create weapons specifically designed to kill NIGMA ships. As more of his fleet fell to human attacks, Korthang realized he was facing something the NIGMA Empire had never encountered before, an enemy that had spent decades preparing specifically to destroy them. The humans had turned their apparent weakness into the ultimate weapon, the element of surprise. The battle that was supposed to last an hour had become a grinding nightmare with no end in sight. The emergency klaxons wailed throughout Admiral. Korthang's flagship, as another section of his ship, vented atmosphere into space. Half his fleet was already destroyed or crippled, and the remaining ships were taking a beating from weapons that shouldn't have existed. The humans were supposed to be primitive, but their attacks were more sophisticated than anything the NIGMA Empire had faced in centuries. "Sir, reinforcements from the outer system are arriving," his communications officer reported with relief in his voice. Korthang's spirits lifted as he watched 50 additional NIGMA warships drop out of hyperspace. These were fresh vessels with full weapon loads and undamaged shields. Surely now they could overwhelm the surprisingly resilient human defenders, but his hope turned to horror as the human fleet revealed weapons that made his blood run cold. Dr. Hyun-Soo Lim had spent decades in secret laboratories working with fragments of alien technology recovered from crashed probes and intercepted transmissions. What he had created defied everything the NIGMA Empire thought they knew about warfare. "Activate mirror protocols," General Minho commanded from Earth's hidden command center. Across the battlefield, human ships suddenly began reflecting the NIGMA's own energy weapons back at them, the plasma cannons and particle beams that the aliens had relied on for conquest were turned against their creators with devastating effect. Ships that had never been threatened by their own weapons found their armor melting under familiar energy signatures. "Impossible!" Admiral Korthang screamed as his flagship's own plasma beam bounced off a human destroyer and sliced through his cruiser escort. Energy doesn't work that way. But it did work that way when you understood the fundamental frequencies of NIGMA weapons better than the NIGMA themselves did. Human scientists had analyzed every energy pulse, every particle stream, every plasma burst until they could predict and redirect the attacks with surgical precision. Captain Jae-hyun watched from the bridge of his destroyer. Defiance as enemy. Fire reflected harmlessly off his ship's new defensive systems. The mirror technology wasn't just a shield. It was a weapon that used the enemy's strength against them. "Boarding teams prepare for assault," Jae-hyun announced over the ship's communication system. "Show them what happens when you threaten our home." The human Marines who launched from Defiance toward the nearest NIGMA cruiser moved with equipment designed specifically for fighting aliens in their own environment. Led by Sergeant Soyeon Chang, they had trained for years in simulated NIGMA ship layouts, studying every weakness in alien psychology and physiology. The Marines breached the enemy hull using cutting tools that combined human engineering with alien metallurgy. As they poured into the NIGMA ship's corridors, the alien crew discovered something terrifying. Humans were naturally better at close-quarters combat than species that had relied on superior technology for centuries. "Their reaction time," a NIGMA officer gasped to his commander as human Marines moved through their ship like ghosts. "They're faster than our targeting computers can track." The truth was evolutionary. Humans had spent millions of years as both predators and prey on a world filled with dangers. Every human instinct had been sharpened by constant threats. While the NIGMA Empire had grown soft through easy conquests, humanity had never stopped fighting for survival. Sergeant Soyeon led her team through the alien ship's winding passages with weapons designed for fighting NIGMA warriors. Her squad moved like a pack of wolves, covering each other's movements and striking with coordinated precision that overwhelmed the confused alien defenders. "Bridge secured," she reported into her communicator as the last NIGMA officer fell. "This ship is ours." Throughout the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human boarding parties captured ship after ship. The aliens discovered that their advanced vessels became death traps when humans fought inside them. Narrow corridors that had seemed like good defensive positions became killing fields where human agility and aggression dominated alien size and strength. Admiral Korthang watched his tactical display with growing despair as ship after ship changed, from red to blue indicating human capture. His reinforcements were being systematically destroyed or boarded by an enemy that seemed to multiply like a plague. "Fall back," he finally ordered, his pride crumbling along with his fleet. "Signal. The High Council, we need the entire Imperial Navy." But retreat wasn't going to be simple. Captain Min Soo-yoon and his special operations team had already infiltrated Korthang's flagship through a maintenance airlock. While the admiral focused on the external battle, human commandos moved through his ship's ventilation systems like deadly shadows. The NIGMA guards who tried to stop them discovered that humans were terrifyingly effective in confined spaces. Minsu's team used weapons and tactics specifically designed for fighting inside alien vessels. Every corridor became a battlefield where human determination overwhelmed alien technology. Security breach on decks 7 through 12, the flagship's computer announced in its emotionless alien voice. Korthang realized with growing horror that the humans were inside his own ship. These weren't random attacks, they were surgical strikes aimed at specific targets. The boarding party moved through his vessel with a knowledge of NIGMA ship design that suggested decades of preparation. Minsu reached the flagship's bridge as the last alien warriors fell before human weapons. The admiral stood alone among the bodies of his command crew, his multiple eyes wide with disbelief. This wasn't how conquest was supposed to work. The NIGMA Empire had always been the predator, never the prey. "You were warned," Minsu said simply, his weapon trained on the alien. "Commander!" As the flagship fell silent, the remaining NIGMA vessels fled into hyperspace, carrying word of their devastating defeat. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the NIGMA Empire had been humbled by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive. The humans had turned the tables completely. What started as an invasion had become a rout, and the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy was a completely different place. News of humanity's victory had spread faster than wildfire through every star system, carried by terrified NIGMA survivors and intercepted by alien intelligence networks. The mighty empire that had ruled through fear for over 1,000 years was crumbling like a house of cards. Ambassador Jiho Kim stood at the center of the Great Assembly Hall on Harmony Point, the neutral space station where representatives from dozens of worlds had gathered. The chamber was packed with alien species he had never seen before, beings with scales, fur, tentacles, and forms that defied description. What they all had in common was the way they looked at him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The NIGMA. "Empire is gone," Jiho announced to the hushed crowd. "Their fleets are scattered, their commanders are dead or in hiding, and their subjects are free for the first time in generations." A ripple of whispers spread through the assembly. Some of these species had been enslaved for so long they couldn't remember what freedom felt like. Others had watched their homeworld stripped of resources while their people lived in poverty. The idea that the mighty empire could be defeated by a single species seemed impossible. "How?" asked the representative from Kepler 442b, a bird-like creature whose people had been mining slaves for 3 centuries. "How did you destroy something so powerful?" Jiho smiled, remembering the conversation he'd had with General Minho just before leaving Earth. "We didn't destroy them because we were stronger. We destroyed them because they made the fundamental mistake of underestimating what happens when you threaten someone's home." In the audience, Minji Wu took detailed notes on every species present. As humanity's first galactic trade commissioner, she was already fielding requests for technology sharing, defense agreements, and economic partnerships. Worlds that had hidden from the NIGMA Empire for centuries were suddenly eager to meet the species that had accomplished the impossible. The transformation had been rapid and complete. Within weeks of the battle, rebellions had erupted on every NIGMA-controlled world. Slave species who had served the Empire for generations turned on their masters with weapons provided by human allies. Prison planets became free colonies overnight. Mining operations that had stripped worlds bare were abandoned as their alien overseers fled for their lives. General Minho, now promoted to head Earth's new stellar defense force, watched the proceedings from the diplomatic gallery. Beside him sat Dr. Sunho, reviewing proposals from former NIGMA worlds, seeking human assistance in developing their own defense capabilities. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. They spent centuries perfecting weapons to conquer others, Dr. Sunho observed quietly. Now everyone wants to learn how to defend themselves. "The best defense," Minho replied, "is making sure bullies think twice before starting a fight." The requests for help had been overwhelming. Dozens of species wanted human military advisors, human technology, human training programs. But humanity had made it clear from the beginning that they weren't interested in replacing the NIGMA Empire with a human one. They offered partnership, not domination. Captain Yuna, now Admiral of the First Human Fleet, had spent the past month visiting liberated worlds throughout the former empire. What she found had reinforced humanity's decision to fight. Entire species, reduced to slavery, planets stripped of their resources, civilizations that had been deliberately kept primitive to prevent rebellion. The worst part, she had reported to the Earth Council, is that most of them accepted it. They had been beaten, down for so long they couldn't imagine any other way of life. But that was changing rapidly. On world after world, former slaves were discovering their own potential. Species that had been forced to mine minerals were becoming engineers. Races that had served as manual labor were developing their own technologies. The galaxy was waking up from a 1,000-year nightmare. The most dramatic change had come from within the NIGMA military itself. Admiral Korthang was dead, killed during the human boarding of his flagship. Most of his surviving officers had fled to the far edges of the galaxy, taking whatever ships they could steal. But some had done something unprecedented. They had surrendered to the species they had come to conquer. These defectors brought with them detailed intelligence about NIGMA technology, military tactics, and the locations of hidden bases throughout the galaxy. More importantly, they brought confirmation of what humanity had suspected. The Empire had been rotting from within for centuries, held together only by fear and superior firepower. Jiho concluded his address to the Galactic Council with words that would be remembered for generations. "We warned the NIGMA Empire about Earth. They chose not to listen. We suggest the rest of the galaxy learn from their mistake." He paused, letting his words sink into every alien mind present. "Humanity seeks peace, but we're prepared for war. We offer friendship to those who want it, protection to those who need it, and consequences to those who threaten innocent lives. The choice, as always, is yours." The chamber erupted in applause, not the polite diplomatic clapping typical of such gatherings, but genuine enthusiasm from beings who had lived their entire lives under the shadow of tyranny. For the first time in over a millennium, the galaxy had hope. As the session ended and representatives began forming groups to discuss trade agreements and mutual defense pacts, Jiho received a message from Earth. Construction had begun on humanity's first interstellar colonies, not as conquerors but as partners with the species they had helped liberate. The age of human expansion had begun, but it would be unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Where the NIGMA Empire had brought slavery and exploitation, humanity brought freedom and cooperation. Where the aliens had demanded submission, humans offered partnership. The galaxy would never be the same, and for the first time in 1,000 years, that was a good thing.